Sons of Sam was absolutely insane. I really, really liked that documentary. It was a slow burn for me at first, just because the first part of it was just a recap of, I feel like I gotta sneeze. It was just a recap of how the Son of Sam was caught and what New York City was like during that time. But then when they started getting into kind of why they think it's the Sons of Sam instead of the Son of Sam, that's where it started to get really, really interesting, just because when all this was happening, I was not born or a very young child. So none of this, beyond the fact that the sketches being different, I had heard that there was a theory that there was more than one Son of Sam killer, and I had always heard that it was some conspiracy theory based off of the fact that the sketches from several of the victims or witnesses differed to the point where they thought it couldn't be the same person. But beyond that, I didn't know that they had all this actual evidence, this credible evidence. So once it really started getting going on that, I was hooked. So if you don't know who the Son of Sam is, his name is David Berkowitz, and he started shooting people in their cars in New York City in the 70s. So I was born in 86. Like I said, a lot of this stuff happened, like the actual crimes happened before I was born. And the documentary goes into talking about how New York was during that time. And New York went through a period where it was not a good place to live. A lot of crime, just very dangerous city apparently. And the documentary goes into that a little bit and just kind of paints a picture of the feeling in the air, how bad New York already was, and then you add in this killer that went on for a while and people were living in fear. So what's interesting is I feel like, at least with the Son of Sam and Ted Bundy and maybe other serial killers, but they always targeted long brown-haired women with parts in the middle. And when they were going through and talking to the public about the fear that they had, and they were talking to women and barbershop owners talking about how people were going in and changing their hair just so that they wouldn't be a target. So before the Son of Sam was caught, he was sending letters to the police that were later used as clues, or later looked at to find clues to further prove that there was more than one Son of Sam killer. So the theory is that there, like I said, were many shooters. And the main person who was really into this theory was a journalist called Maury Terry. And really, even more than the Son of Sam, this documentary was about him, because he worked for a computer company and wrote articles for them for a long time, and he really hated the subject matter and latched onto the theory that there were more than one shooter in the Son of Sam killings. And so he started analyzing everything. He started analyzing letters and got a lot from the letters. So he called himself the Son of Sam and referenced a dog. And so from the letters, and from, I guess, based off of where he lived, which was near another house, that the people that lived in that house had names that were similar to the letter. So Son of Sam, David Berkowitz. He lived in an apartment building near a house owned by a man named Sam Carr, who owned a black dog. So there was that connection. And then Sam Carr had 2 sons, John Carr and Michael Carr. There were some other things in the letter that kind of connected them further. After some digging, they found out that the brothers, the Carr brothers, and David Berkowitz were a part of this satanic cult, because beyond the apartment building in their home, the Carr home, there was this like abandoned area that had a cave and some outer areas where they did, like, this cult would meet and they did sacrifices and all this weird stuff. And it turns out that David Berkowitz and the Carr brothers were all part of this cult. It wasn't just a cult, it was supposedly something called the Process Church, which I guess is a cult, but it has this crazy connection to Scientology because it was 2 former Scientologists that created the Process Church, and then supposedly the Process Church, well, it started in Europe, and then supposedly they've just been recruiting people all over the place, and, you know, basically they're supposed to be behind all of this. So I just thought it was funny, the connection to Scientology. I'm not saying Scientology had anything to do with it. I just think it's funny because, you know, these days when you hear about Scientology, you don't hear great things. And I just think it's funny that 2 former members created this Process Church, which at the end of the documentary, there's text on the screen that talks about how the Process Church disbanded before, you know, any of this stuff happened, and that they don't really have any ties to this. So this is all theory. Maury Terry goes on this years-long investigative journey, and so as I said, the John Carr and Michael Carr were supposedly in all of this. They, I guess, supposedly, I keep saying I say supposedly because these are all theories. None of this stuff was, like, really taken seriously. A lot of people ignored it and didn't want to acknowledge it, basically. And so I say supposedly, but I guess let's just have that be implied. I don't have to keep saying supposedly. So the Carr's dad was abusive towards them, so there's other connections to that in the letters that David Berkowitz sent. The Carr brothers were never spoken to about this because they died of mysterious circumstances. So as Maury Terry was piecing things together and was able to connect the Carr brothers to the Son of Sam killings, one, I think, committed suicide, or at least if it was a homicide, it was made to look like a suicide in this remote area that when people that were investigating the Sons of Sam claims went to this place, there you go again, the area was really desolate, and just upon landing from their plane, they wanted to leave. It just had a really bad feeling about it. I don't know if it was one of the Dakotas, I can't remember where they went, but Maury Terry had associates, people that he came across over the years that were other police officers and victims that had survived, were helping him investigate this angle. And when they went and talked to police officers there that had gone to the scene and had seen them around town, it just kind of further led to the creep factor. So Terry, I'm just going to call Maury Terry, or should we say Maury? I'll say Maury. Maury also drew a connection to a photographer and a woman who was 20 years younger than him that associated with him in New York, who had been killed and their apartment had been ransacked. Supposedly, Jesus Christ, again. I can't help but say supposedly because I don't know what else to say. Anyway, supposedly by people from the Process Church trying to find videos that the photographer had made of some of the shootings. And then this cult was supposed to be so widespread that it was even in entertainment. There was this big producer that was mysteriously killed and left in a desert in California, and that was supposed to be about his connection to the Sons of Sam killings. It was supposed to just be this very big, widespread thing that Maury was trying to prove. He wrote a book. What was his book called? I've forgotten now. The Ultimate Evil. He came out with this book called The Ultimate Evil, and I think at first it was a pretty popular book, and then he started going on these talk show circuits on news programs, and it really just became something that people didn't take seriously. He tried to go to the cops in New York, the New York Police Department, and they really didn't want new evidence introduced. They wanted everything to have been solved, and they didn't want to go back into it. I guess from the beginning they kind of had it in their head of what they were going to do, and they didn't want to hear anything else about it. He was really frustrated because he wanted to be taken seriously. He wanted to be heard. There were people that believed what he was saying. He had gotten a couple interviews, jailhouse interviews with David Berkowitz, and David Berkowitz later found God and started talking to Maury and admitted that he wasn't alone and that he committed some of the crimes, but he was present at all the crimes. But he was scared and didn't want to really say who, except he would admit that the Carr brothers were involved, but they're dead now. But he seemed scared of somebody and was uncomfortable and just really didn't want to divulge anything. Also, he said it was really hard to talk about, just in general. So basically, Maury lived this life he had this life's work, and he wound up just dying alone. And he had a friend who was helping him on this case and talked about how, as Maury was on his deathbed, he gave his friend a number to call to follow up on some lead. So he spent decades trying to solve this case. And it's really sad. He was married at one point, and then he and his wife got divorced, but they remained friends. One thing that was really interesting that kind of goes to show how thoroughly he would investigate things, and how, at least in one case, he was proven to be right. There was one case of a woman who, I think it was another Son of Sam case, or maybe it wasn't connected, I can't remember, but Maury was investigating it, and he had this theory that a security guard killed this woman inside of a church. But nobody believed him at the time. Years later, DNA evidence showed that he did kill the woman, and then there's body cam footage at the end of the documentary of police officers going to this now elderly security guard's, well, he wasn't a security guard anymore, but this elderly former security guard's apartment to arrest him. And he's like, hang on, I gotta put on my pants, and he's taking a long time, and the police officer's like, we'll come in and help you. And you can see as he opens the door, there's a gun pointed at him, and then the security guard turns the gun on himself. So he later on was proven to be absolutely right, at least in that case. So that's pretty much it. But obviously I have given some spoilers, so if you've watched this far, you've probably already seen it as well. Or if you're like me and you don't mind spoilers and you're still going to watch something if you're interested enough, I would say it's definitely worth a watch. If you're older than me, like maybe my parents' age, or if you were a teenager at the time, you're probably familiar with all this stuff from just in the news, because they had a lot of footage from the time talking about Maury Terry and all of his theories. But for me, the only thing I knew was I knew of David Berkowitz and the name Son of Sam, and I believe I do vaguely recall a Unsolved Mysteries episode about the cult theory and that there was more than one Son of Sam, but all this evidence and all this detail I was not privy to. I've always had a morbid fascination, like probably most people do, with serial killers, and Son of Sam was never one that really particularly intrigued me. But when I saw that this documentary was coming out, I thought it would be interesting to watch, and I was right. So I learned something new. If you like these kinds of videos, please leave a like and subscribe and turn on notifications so that you know when I upload. And that's going to be it for this one. I think I'm going to do a trailer reaction next. I saw that there's a new Purge movie coming out. Never seen a Purge movie, but I figure, I like creepy things, and since I'm doing trailer reactions and I'm typically drawn to more like dark movies and documentaries and the like, that it would be like, it would make sense for me to do a trailer reaction, but I just think that Purge movies are absolute smut and stupid and ridiculous. But I don't know, that I'm opening myself up to watching new things. So even if I don't like it, and even if I'm coming from a pessimistic view, I still think, it's worth putting out there. So stay tuned for that.